I applied to 50 different jobs and I got rejected by 49 of them. A lot of times people define these things through their career goals, but local conditions send you in different directions. I was 2 years into my grad program. I was really like, do I really want this? I thought having a PhD was a doorway into everything. Certainly some of the best user researchers I've ever worked with do not have PhDs. Where do things feel easy to you and not easy to other people? We're going to do the thing nobody else can do because they're afraid of hard work and we're not. I have still yet to really find anything in life I enjoy more than the moment of understanding. One day I just talked to him and I just said, hey, I know I'm your manager, but I have a ton to learn from you. Curiosity is free IQ points if you let it be. How do you get obsessed and make things that people end up loving? I just want to be part of this.
You ever wondered how someone with a background in psychology, technology, and art found themselves at the forefront of responsible AI? My guest today, Jess Holbrook, has navigated a fascinating career path. It led him from the world of human-computer interaction to shaping the future of AI at some of the world's most influential tech companies. From his early days at Microsoft to his pivotal roles at Google and Meta, Jess has been at the cutting edge of AI research and ethics, helping to ensure that these technologies are not just innovative, but also responsible and human-centered. Today, we'll dig into his journey, how he broke into HCI, his experiences with rejection, and the evolution of AI's role in design and technology. I'm your host, Chris Abad, and this is Pixelated Path. In this episode, Jess and I explore everything from the technical intricacies of AI to the very human challenges of career growth and staying motivated in a fast-changing industry. If you're curious about the intersection of psychology, technology, and art, or if you're navigating your own career challenges, this conversation's packed with insights you won't want to miss. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Pixelated Path so you can stay up to date with more inspiring stories and actionable advice from the tech world's most innovative minds. And now, let's jump in. Welcome to the Pixelated Path. Jess, great to have you.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
So I know you had an internship going through grad school that sort of got you into HCI in the first place. Why don't you tell me more about that?
Yeah. I went to, I was an undergrad and I did work in social psychology. And so I got a job at, I think, what was the only startup in Eugene, Oregon at the time. I don't know how I got there. And so, it being a startup and being an internship, I walked in each day and found out what I was going to do for the day. So, I just kind of tried to do that for a day, and then you walk in and you just do all these different things. And most of them are, pretty lowly work. And so one day I come in and they say, hey, we want you to design the page where we're going to sell ads on our website. And we have this, and don't worry, we have a copy of Dreamweaver for you. They literally, handed me box software. I installed it. They pointed me toward the code base for the website. I don't think at that point I'd written a line of code outside of, high school classes or whatever. And I just started commenting out code. And, I'm like, oh, I get rid of this code and everything that was in the center moves to the left. Oh, weird. I get rid of this code and that image goes away, and it was almost learning by reduction. And then I kind of figured it out. And so I designed the page and, did some other stuff, worked there for a little bit. And I went back to my grad school advisor and I didn't even have the language for design at the time. And so I went back to him and I said, hey, I really am interested in psychology, technology, and art. What should I do? And he said, you should go into HCI, human computer interaction. And I was like, that sounds really interesting. Yeah. And then he, through kind of one really lucky opportunity to another, is he connected me with another professor on campus. And she, is HCI professor. And, a common thread, I think, throughout my career is just people caring about me that I don't think that they needed to. And she cared about me and she took me under her wing and she pushed on me.
Very cool. The interest in art, did that start like through this experience with the internship, or going into school, did you already have this interest in art? Because it's sort of this like collection of things that you pulled together that, the response was, oh, that's HCI. But where did art come from?
Yeah, kind of like looking back, my there's an artist, there is some artistic streak in my family. My mom has always painted for as long as I can remember and always took us to museums and things like that. I think that in, going around just the city in Seattle, you'll see some of the murals and things like that. And I think that there's, a basic appreciation there. I think the thing that a lot of times people lack is just a vocabulary to express how they feel, or how something makes them feel, or why they care or why they don't. Sometimes it's very difficult to talk about why something speaks to everyone else and does nothing for you. But I think it kind of began there. And then in that internship, this was also kind of like iPod era. And so there was this rise of the emotional reaction to things where you'd say, oh, yeah, I really like that. I can't totally describe to you why, but it has pull for me. And I think connecting that to my psychology background is I'm just fascinated by that, right? And that I think really kind of pulled me more into the design side of things.
Interesting. I mean, you've now, like, this was a while ago. You've had an opportunity to sort of like see your career play out. You've held many different roles. Looking back, how well do you think that held true? If you look at how it all started and your goal was to find this intersection between like art, psychology, technology, do you still look at what you do as that, or did it morph into something else?
And making sure that kind of looked good and focused more on usability. And now I think we think a lot more about the billions of people around the earth using many different devices in trillions of interactions. I don't even know what the scope would be. And really trying to elevate beyond, oh, it works well, the design isn't terrible, to something like, well, okay, these aren't a machine I go use in a room, right? This is one of the big evolutions, right? I don't know if you're, again, dating myself, but, we used to have a computer room in the house, which was like the guest room, but it had the computer in it. It was you went to a place to compute things. And now it's obviously everywhere, ubiquitous all the time. And so we're trying to think about, wow, if that's not, and sometimes for some people, that's not part of their life. That's the majority of their life. So it better be enjoyable. It better be the life you want if it's going to be that large of a part of, just quite literally the bits that, and, the photons that are hitting, your eyes and the words that you're reading and the messages that you're sending people. And so I think it's just grown and grown and grown. And I think myself and I think just everybody is trying to grapple with how do you get your hands on it at that point. It's pretty far from commenting out some code on a random static web page, to sell some ads.
It's so interesting to contrast how much like tasks and things that you do in this space have evolved and changed. Also interesting, I feel like there's so many people that have had those moments where you're having a conversation and you describe something and someone's like, oh, that sounds like HCI. And there goes, that now sets you on a path for the rest of your career. But I imagine like it wasn't all straightforward from there. Can you tell me about a time in those early days where maybe you had to deal with rejection getting into like your HCI career?
Yeah, I mean, I finished my, this is during the state boom. So before the Great Recession and the bust. And so I'm down in Eugene, Oregon, and I'm getting my degree and I'm making, a TA's salary. And, I remember one day I realized, actually, based on the amount of money I was being paid, I qualified for food stamps. And so I went to the the local office because I was like, I could use a couple extra $100 a month. Like that would mean the world to me. And actually the problem is the compensation to kind of cover my classes, my tuition compensation counted as income. So I did not qualify, but based on the income. And so that's the life, the grad school life. And meanwhile, all my friends are up in Seattle, riding this wave, doing a lot, as the kids say. And so there was a pull to kind of be like, okay, I want to wrap up. I want to be done. I kind of knew what my dissertation was about. And so I actually finished my dissertation, or sorry, I finished grad school in 4 years. I think I was the first one out of my class to graduate. And so I popped up and I said, okay, awesome. I can't wait. Look at me. I'm a newly minted PhD. All these companies are going to be clamoring for me. And I had a spreadsheet, I remember, and I applied to 50 different jobs and I got rejected by 49 of them. And the one that I got was actually as a contractor at Microsoft. So I wasn't FTE or full time. And, I kind of got hired by some great people who I'm still connected with, who, I don't know why, it's that classic. I don't know why. I don't know what they saw. I don't know why me out of all the other people that applied to that job. And so I'm very grateful for that. I mean, to be like really honest, there was very mixed emotions. I felt like a lot of, you got to be kidding me. Like at the time I thought, having a PhD was a doorway into everything. And, but I didn't have any industry experience. I was just a risk in a different way to just about everybody. But yeah, that felt pretty terrible. I mean, as anyone, I know a lot of people, there have been layoffs lately and there's people looking and, I think that would be way worse, where I am now in my life with so many other responsibilities. Like at the time it was bad, but I didn't have a lot of responsibilities in life. So it was, the fallout was kind of minimal. But yeah, it doesn't feel great at all to hear no's. And then a lot of times, you hear a no and there's no reason. And a lot of times you want to know, well, why? What helped me? And for all the various reasons, they kind of don't tell you. But yeah, then I found a role and I got to learn and I got to show what I could do. And, that's what people wanted.
I think that experience of struggling to find your next role and getting a lot of no's really resonates for a lot of people right now. Like you said, the job market is extremely competitive. There are far fewer jobs out there than there have been historically for anyone in the UX field. Although the most recent data says that the role of UX research is actually on the rise, which is great, but it's still competitive. And it can be discouraging. How did you keep yourself motivated during that time to keep going with, you said 49 rejections?
Yeah, I think I did, I think I did what a lot of people do is I made that my job. So, I said, I'm going to work by applying places, by doing searches, by trying to figure things out. I think even then I was, pretty good at, I guess what we call like self-care now, which is, I would work out every morning. I would try not to eat too terribly. I would have something else in my life so it didn't become my whole life. And I think I really think that's like deeply important in those tough times, because I think the problem is when you're just hearing all these no's, it is very hard not to hear no to you, the person, instead of no to the resume or the fit for this particular role. Because a no can be in a lot of different ways. A no can be, and this is I think people hate hearing this, but no, you're overqualified. We need a more junior person than where you're at. There can be these, in a way, kind of good no's. But it is really hard to hear that over and over and over again and not think, do I not have something I need? Did I mess up along the way? Is there something that that I don't realize that just nobody will tell me to my face? It can become very gaslighting and you start to doubt yourself in a lot of ways. But yeah, it was really tough, especially early in the career. It's really tough. I think if I hadn't gotten that role, it's funny to look back on, because a lot of times people define these things through their career goals and these big arcs, but local conditions send you in different directions. And I'm like, yeah, I think if I hadn't gotten into that, I probably would have taken on some role in the real estate boom, because that's just what everyone went and did. Then, I probably would have been like doing something with mortgages or something, because I'm guessing the math would appeal to me more than, some of the other parts. So yeah, there's like this alternate path, right? And then obviously that becomes a terrible idea 2 years later. So again, some just luck of the draw there.
Yeah, that's fortunate. I think perhaps as an industry, we're lucky that Microsoft had that role for you and you didn't end up going down the real estate path.
So, you never, I think I have more to contribute in these roles, but you never know. Maybe, best mortgage guy around. I don't know. Just never got to be that.
What about your education? So you mentioned like going through school, like you exited and you sort of came into the job market, assuming that having that degree was going to open up doors for you that it didn't feel like it was. What about people today who are out there weighing the decision of going into a PhD program versus going into the job market sooner? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this is an honest podcast. I mean, I was 2 years into my grad program. I was really like, God, do I really want this? Should I just go? Should I just go into industry? Because I was really interested. That was past the prior study the prior story. So I knew where I wanted to go at that point. Like I knew I didn't want to be going to academia or anything like that. And so there was this really hard moment of, do I want to finish this or not? Or should I just go? And, you're doing all these calculations. I think for me, I did care about my research topic a lot. But then I also, I think, got to a point where I said, I want to accomplish this in my life. Like I want to have a PhD. I want that to be a part of my life. And so I think that there's a couple considerations. I tend to give people this kind of career guidance in a lot of different ways, but I just say, where does it feel like you're swimming with the current? Where do things feel easy to you and not easy to other people? And you should head there because that's probably an indication of some natural ability. And so if you can go where it's easy for you and not for other people, and then you actually try really hard, that you're setting yourself up for some success in whatever that is. And so, I'd never say to somebody, you should go burn 5 years of your life. Let's say you finish in 5. A lot of times it takes them 6 years to do their PhD. And those are often prime years. Those are like your 20s, maybe your early 30s. Like those are real good years. Like as you get on and as you go on, you trade a lot for those years back. The older you get, the more you would trade for those years back. So you should treat those with value. And so I think you should go if it really lights you up, if it's electric, if you feel like, wow, I think I can really do this. And then I'm going to put some gas on this and see how far I can push it. I had another advisor and she was great. She said, this is more about academia, but she said, to succeed here, you have to have a almost unhealthy obsession with your research topic. And I thought that was really insightful. You need to be just like one step back from the line of hold on here. That's a little too much. But I think that's a big one. So if there's a research topic you just can't get out of your head, you're thinking about it at the party when you should be paying attention to the conversation, that's probably a good sign. I think also, you might get to a place where I said, I want this to be part of my life. I want this to be part of my story. I think that this is, in a healthy way, like I think this is part of my identity. And so I think that matters a lot. I think if you're doing it because it'll help you in your career, for a lot of them, especially in UX research, I don't think it will. I think it probably opens more doors early on, but I don't think it's not like you get capped somewhere because you don't have a PhD. And certainly some of the best user researchers I've ever worked with do not have PhDs. So yeah, I do think it gives you a lot of tools for looking at human technology problems that it gives you more of the abstractions and the bigger arcs of the work. Whereas the industry work, a lot of times it can pull you a little too close to things. And so I think when you have that balance, it makes you a very insightful and differentiated researcher.
Very interesting. Great insight. I like your point about needing to have that like obsession with the research problems, sort of like offset the like struggle and pain potentially that you go through and the hard work that you go through. I feel like it's so similar with having a startup. Like it's sort of glamorized and people assume that it's all great, but man, it is hard work. And so you have to have really real drive and obsession over the problem that you're going after. Otherwise, it's kind of not worth it.
Yeah, one of the things that when you're looking at to kind of tie it to more like team building and organization building is, I'm a big believer in purpose is the big factor, and the rest is kind of rounding errors. You got to do the rest, but if you can articulate a purpose for the work, and we used to have this phrase I used to talk about in my teams a lot is work worth doing. Is this work worth doing? If you can say, yeah, this is work worth doing, then you can get through a lot of the random stuff. And it's, the Jensen Huang has been saying this, right? In video, it's kind of funny. He became like, people all of a sudden want to interview him, all over the place because of the stock run up and everything. But I've seen him talk about this, and it's great. Like, he talks about the hard work a lot, and it's just great. He kind of says, yeah, it's going to be hard. That's why nobody else is going to do it. And which is why we're going to do the thing nobody else can do, because they're afraid of hard work and we're not. And I think that that's great. And I think that the thing that pushes you, though, through that hard work is the purpose. Because you say, okay, if I can have that on the other side, then yeah, I can push through. I think the other one I've thought about, I've talked to people about, is you have to there's part of, I have a buddy who's a Marine, and he's full of wisdom. And one of his things is he says, everybody's job looks good until you have to do it. And this is his kind of way of saying, yeah, you see we all see the cool parts of each other's job. We don't see the job though. And I think of it too as like, you have to like the crust of the job. You have to like every job has a little grimy part, but there's not anything anyone would say is their favorite part. But you gotta find something in that. You gotta find some enjoyment in that. If you do, you're in the right place.
Now I feel like I got to ask, because you potentially have listeners who are like at the beginning of their career and probably see more of the glamorous parts than anything. What's the grimy part of what you do?
Yeah, that is funny. Yeah, it's because I come, you come and you do a podcast and you say like inspirational things, and it sounds like you walk around, being inspirational all day or whatever. No, these are the good bits. This is the stuff you want to listen to that we're going to pull in. Yeah, let me actually go back to the beginning for a second, then I'll pop up here. One of the things I loved about the first role I had, the contractor role at Microsoft, is it actually moved a lot of the grime or the tough parts away. So I would just, I was on this cycle. It's like week 1, plan a study. Week 2, conduct a study. Week 3, analyze and present a study. Repeat. And so I always tell people it was great. I just got laps. I just got to get used to the mechanics of the thing. It's just pick your sports metaphor. I just got to work on my dribble for months. And it was really a blessing in disguise. I think that the parts of my job, I'll start with the things that I really. So I'm definitely in the Feynman school of the joy of figuring things out. I have still yet to really find anything in life I enjoy more than not understanding something and then the moment of understanding. I love it. It doesn't get old. I look for it all the time. And then when it comes to people, I love being a people manager. I always say amplifies everything. The highs are high and the lows are lower. When somebody you have and you unlock something in them that they didn't really understand, and you help them and they saw it, and that leads to their success, it always feels better than your own success. So yeah, I think the things that I don't enjoy about my role are roles that I've been in. I mean, there's part of it that everyone kind of talks about is I don't want to call it, I don't know another word for it, but the politics at a certain level. The thing that actually gets me more than anything is the indirectness that starts. So as you kind of, move up in management and leadership roles, is far more of the job becomes things like listening for what's not said, triangulating, figuring out what exactly people's motives are. And that's not my, even though I'm a psychologist and I do figuring out why people do what they do, I'd much rather be in a place where things were just open, and there's structural reasons why that happens. I don't do hardly any selling of UXR anymore. It's probably actually a weakness of mine. but I've decided if you do not realize the value, especially of design or user research in 2024, I actually like to use the iPhone as the marker of like appreciating design and UX. And so I'm like, if we're 17 years past the iPhone launch and you're not getting it, I don't know if there's anything I'm going to say to you that's going to make you get it. So I really don't enjoy those parts. I don't enjoy, managing, having to manage or work with low performance. That is a thing that happens. You want everybody to succeed, obviously, but also that can be a tough part and that can weigh down a team and that can be corrosive. And so you have to deal with that decisively. All the parts about the research I love. I mean, I love it was a little while ago, I had a person on my team who was out and they started their parental leave a little early. And so there was this big presentation that they were supposed to do. And I said, okay, I'll just step in and kind of finish it out and do it for them. And I was just in there and I was just working on the deck, putting the data points together, telling the story. And I was so happy. I just had my headphones in. I was just grinding that thing out. And I was like, yep, I still love this thing. It just still puts a smile on my face because I got those moments. I was like, okay, this is how this piece connects. All right, here's how we're going to talk about it. Okay, we have a clear recommendation of what to do next. And it all worked out. And I still love that stuff to this day.
Earlier, you were talking about like your role as a people manager and how in that role you're able to sort of like amplify your impact and amplify people. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more because at Microsoft, that was where you had your first opportunity to move into management from an IC role. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, it was a couple years in and I had a really great manager at the time. I don't know if we do shout outs on the show or not, but Steve Scallon, and he's still here at Microsoft. And he was a great manager and a great mentor to me. And he gave me the heads up, hey, this is kind of like, it wasn't a guarantee, but it was like a possibility. And so it allowed me to prepare, which was really great because I honestly felt like that helped me dodge a bunch of the mistakes that so many people make transferring from IC to management. And, it was kind of odd in the beginning because you have a few different dynamics that happen. So one thing I really remember is at the time, actually, it was kind of obvious that it would be me or another person who got this role. And this is a researcher I respect a lot. I respected then, I respect her now. And we kind of knew it and I got it. And so one of the first things I did is I went and I talked to her and I just said, hey, I know that you wanted this role too. And, just know, I think you'd be great. And I respect you and like, all the things. And that I think that actually, it's my perception that helped our relationship a lot. But I think that's an odd thing. A lot of times whenever you get a role, I kind of tell this to people too, is if you take on a new role, and especially if it's a role in management or if it's a role with visibility, you just took somebody's job. Somebody thinks that they were a better pick than you. And I really advise people to identify that person and to, with sincerity, make them an ally because they're going to be able to, you're going to need to work with them one way or another. And I think that that's really important. And so that there is this thing of, if you can air those things out quickly and show your respect, I think that then you can turn that into productive relationships really quickly. I think then there were two other experiences that were really interesting for me. I mean, then you start to manage some of your former peers, which is always has some interesting dynamics associated with it. I found that those are just really individual, one by one, and it can be really odd because previously you may have been very close to people or very like chummy and casual, and you do need to play a role of a manager. Like your job is to hold them to a certain bar of performance and to maintain that and to develop them. And that can be really antithetical. I'm not trying to develop any of my friends outside of work, right? They can do what they want and it's fine. And so that can be really challenging. And then I also began with a lot of other researchers who were pretty early in their career, but then fairly soon I started managing somebody who was far more experienced than me. So I had that experience of, they were both older in age than me, but they had way more experience, way more user research wisdom than I had at that point. And again, I think this transparency piece just helps. Just one day I just kind of talked to him and I just said, hey, I know I'm your manager. This is very early when he started. I said, I know I'm your manager, but I have a ton to learn from you. Like, you've just been doing this way longer than me. And I want to make sure I do that. And I want to make sure that the team learns from that. And I want to make sure that I get you what you need to do the work you already know how to do. And again, I think that set a tone and helps people feel seen, and that what they bring is valued. And I think from there you can then start to really build cohesion and some momentum with the teams. But I think a lot of times people are afraid to do that, hesitant to do that, think it'll be awkward. I mean, for the record, it's almost always awkward. It's not like it's a casual conversation, but it is a lot of times like you pull a thorn out of the paw, and all of a sudden, an hour or two or the next day.
I certainly think that level of transparency can be scary for a lot of people. Either you got the promotion and you go reach out to the person that you just beat them out for that role, or you're a manager and you have someone who has more experience than you, and you let them know that you're new and learning. Especially being a new manager, like, sometimes you have this idea that you're supposed to know everything and people look up to you to have the answers. So there's this fear that if you are transparent, it works against you. Did that ever work out like poorly for you? Or in those moments where you decide to be transparent and vulnerable, is it like always net positive at the end?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think if I ever regretted it. I mean, I will say dumb stuff and, stuff I wish I could bring back. Anybody who's worked with me long enough knows that, but I don't want it on the other side. And one of the things, that I'll talk to people about is, I've got a chance to work on there's this kind of illusion people have somehow that they're going to because the imposter syndrome is you have to believe these weird two things that cannot both be true. So one is that you're not qualified to be, everyone messed up. Somehow you got into a place you shouldn't be. Yet you're skilled enough to trick all of them into believing you should be there, indefinitely or something like that. And so it's odd because, we used to have, I've been lucky enough to get to build up teams in really fun areas and areas that attract talent. And so these are typically very talented person per person teams. And on every one of them, I've had somebody who thought I made a mistake hiring them. And we'd have this funny conversation where we'd talk about it and I'd hear them and honor it. And then I'd have to say, I was like, it's funny to say, but we would say, hey, no, sometimes me and somebody else, we're good at this. We're actually quite good at hiring people. That's why we're in the roles we are. We did not make a mistake with you. The only thing I need you to do is believe it, and we're good to go. And so, yeah, in multiple teams I've had, it was trying to convince people of their worth and ability when they're surrounded by great people. And so, I try to tell people that on the last team I was on in Meta, there was a great, early in his career researcher, and we would have this conversation, and I would tell him, you are surrounded by top talent right now. And so if you can even absorb part of that, you're just leapfrogging so far ahead in your career and in your knowledge and in your enjoyment of this work. But, you just need that openness to it, and that I'm here, I should be here. Yeah, you're not our top person or whatever, because our top person has been doing this 6 times as long as you and is an anomaly, is a top 1% researcher I've ever worked with. but like you are here for a reason. You have a role to play. Step into it and accept the accelerated growth you're about to have.
Sometimes I feel like if you just look at the, you know, tons of people that have worked through imposter syndrome, almost everyone, it always works out in the end. So you can sort of believe that it will work out for you. I had someone who didn't come out the other end of just that feeling of, you made a mistake, I'm not sure I belong here.
Yeah, it's rare, but it has happened. I think it's sad because I think that they are self-defeating in the end. I think they let their doubt get to them, and it's never, I've never seen the situation where, yeah, like we did the wrong hire and they were like we were totally off, and we had to manage that low performance or something like that. I mean, a lot of times it is more of a, I don't know a better word, but like a self-destruct from the doubt, and they second guess everything, and they start to kind of spiral. I've definitely seen, I think actually one of the bigger risks is the opposite. I've definitely seen people, and I've inherited people that are like, I'm great. Like I am top notch. And, at this point in my career, I'm extremely well calibrated to user research talent. I've managed and seen a lot of people at this point, and it's the people that are like, I'm amazing. Like, how do I get that? I just got promoted. How do I get that next promotion? And they're the people that are often have the distorted view of themselves, and that's actually way more problematic because you have all the problems of they can't take feedback and they're hard to work with and they always want the top project and are always upset if they don't have it. And that's way more corrosive. So I think I think the hardest thing is to have that as accurate of a view of yourself as you can. It's really hard. We have all the biases on it. We're gonna err on one side or the other, but I would definitely err a little bit on the side of humility. Maybe I'm not as good as they say, but match that with, but okay, I'm gonna keep working. I'm gonna keep improving. Like, where do I think I have room? Okay, all right, we're gonna take some steps. That seems to work out better than the alternative.
Over the course of your career, have you developed any like techniques either for yourself or maybe people on your team to improve that awareness? If you don't have it, how do you get that?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I mean, I really do think it is one of those things people, 80% of it, 90% of it is people show up with it or they don't, and we're kind of playing with that last percentage. Honestly, I think a lot of it is how people are raised, like their environment growing up, what they've been told their whole life, all these things. So another manager I had, did the old phrase that I like is, there's three sides to every story, yours, mine, and the truth. And so one of the things that I find people do a lot is that they assign beliefs where they do not have any evidence of them. So they say, oh, that person didn't listen to my study because blank, because they're an a-hole, because they don't care about research, because whatever. And it's, well, you're putting that on them. Like, how do we know that that's true? How do we know that's not for another reason? The other one is that, people will, they'll kind of, just make these assumptions about people, their beliefs, like where they're coming from. I think another one that I see people do, sorry, I lost my train of thought there a little bit, is that it's funny. I notice user researchers are sometimes really bad at doing user research on the people they work with. And it's funny because they don't ask questions of people. And I'm like, what are you doing? This is our thing. Do the thing. I'm doing my rounds right now. I'm in a new role. So I'm doing my rounds and I'm meeting all the product heads and stuff. And, my first kind of question to them is like, how's your experience with user research been? Let me ground in who do you even think I am? I'm some guy with some title showing up. What's your reference point for me? Where are we starting at? And then I can understand how you think about things, why you think about them that way. And then if I want to change that perception, I can think about what will be the most effective way to do that. And so I think the second big thing is, we just don't do our thing of like just asking more questions, getting more curious than the next person. Curiosity is free IQ points if you let it be. And so I think that's another one.
Earlier, you were talking about where you're at in your career now. You don't sell UX research as much. Sort of use the iPhone analogy. During your time at Amazon, you were there at a time when qualitative research was not, maybe didn't, it was difficult, like maybe didn't get the airtime that you'd have liked it to. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was only at Amazon for a short time, and it was, that was another tough career transition for me. I moved over at Microsoft. We'd done a lot of qualitative research, and we actually had very little quant at the time. Myself and then another researcher who's at Microsoft as well, did some of the first, really like quantitative analyses of, what you would think of as kind of like what data science does now for Windows, back then. And so I moved over, and it was a small group of researchers, and I worked on, Amazon.com, like the site. And they have a system there for A/B testing. I don't know what they have now, but at the time they had a system there for A/B testing changes to any page. And so they would run flights, and they would collect data, and they would decide how they would change the page. The home page, the details page when you look at a product, all that kind of stuff. And so it was really hard because there was almost this, I kind of tell people, like, you can do quantitative research if you don't care about why. But eventually you always care why something is happening. And so they would do this tremendous amount, and it was just like, why do we need to do this? I moved this module here because the way that the code worked at the time is that, if you look at a product page on Amazon, which is called the detail page, I don't know, I don't even know how many different teams own different parts of that. And so they're all trying to move up in the rank, up on the page and do all this kind of stuff. And they would run these experiments that would kind of say, well, if we move ourselves up here, then we'll make an incremental $100 million a year or something like that. So we're going to do that. And so they really just wanted to kind of increment their way there. And the challenge with that is incrementing is fine if you're in an optimization. So you say, we have the business model figured out. We have the experience figured out. We are just trying to optimize at scale. But the problem is that knocks out almost all the innovation on your side, right? You've dedicated yourself to squeezing that turnip for as long as you can. And so they kind of had no kind of innovation, and they didn't have a lot of why. And so I went and did research in China and Japan, kind of looking at like why sales weren't good there. And that came back with a lot of why. And then we also would do work that we were able to take qualitative work and frame it in terms of kind of like a quantitative frame that people would understand. So at the time, this was also where working really closely with a designer who I worked with a bunch later on at Google and everything on design system there. Sorry, I should do the shout outs, Josh Lovejoy. And so the idea that you would update an entire design system at the time was fairly novel and like very controversial there, because they're like, no, we need to change these components, but not these other ones, and increment it in. And that's not how a design system works, because one of the values of a design system is consistency, and consistency leads to predictability, and predictability leads to efficiency. And so we wanted to do that. And so what we would do then is set up studies where we would do almost like academic reaction time studies. So we'd create prototypes with the old system and the new system, and we'd do these reaction time tasks, and we threw in some eye tracking, because I just think it was, if I remember correctly, it's just kind of what you did at the time. I think we were kind of like trying to figure out how people, visually navigated the new designs. And from there, I remember it as we said, we believe that we will shave on average 2 seconds off of every search. Now, that may not sound like much, but when we looked at it, latency is so important to Amazon.com that when we looked at it, that would have been more additive in revenue than any other experiment that they were flighting, I believe, combined. I believe it was like, if you actually grouped everything else the team was doing, that was it. And so I think that that's a way to take, and we would there was a qualitative aspect to it, as well, but to try to kind of get quant adjacent and speak the language of the organization to be able to get it there. We never did what I really wanted us to do, though, which was a little bit of just embracing the A/B testing nature of it and say, great, you're going to A/B test something. Where do those hypotheses come from? Because they mostly just came from people who worked there being like, what if we moved this up? What if we changed it to blue? And so we kind of said, what if we just had a qualitative research program that was essentially a hypothesis generator for our A/B testing? That's what I wish we would have done. Didn't ever get there, though.
I want to forward in your career a little bit, because now and for the last several years, AI has been a big part of your career and what you think about. And so when you were at Google was when you had that opportunity to first move into working on AI and having that be your focus. What was that like? How did that happen?
Yeah, I think this really comes back, I never was external about anything until the AI stuff came along. But I actually went over to Google and I worked on the cloud platform, like way back in the day. Like I was on cloud and thinking about developers, and I was one of the very first. I think I was the second. Well, we had a lead, and then I think I was the second researcher hired there on that team. And so we were doing a bunch of that. And then one day, this new engineering director, research science director, engineering director, a little both, shows up. His name's Blaise Aguirre-Yarkis. And he comes over and he joined Google from Microsoft, actually. And he does this presentation. And he's kind of like, hey, we have this new machine intelligence group. So this is before we really refer to as a machine learning group or as an AI group. And it was started by a guy, JG, who has led AI at Apple for quite a while now. And so JG started this organization, and Blaise had come over. And he gives this presentation about what's about to happen in AI. And I just was like, sparkles in my eyes. Hell yeah, this is awesome. I cannot believe this. And so at Google, you can do, back then, I don't know how it is now, but like back then you really could do 20% projects. And so I think I like ran from the presentation to my manager. And I was like, I have a 20% project I want to do. I just want to help this team over here. And so I think like a lot of those, a 20% project eventually turns into your 100% project. And I would say that was also a time where kind of what I mentioned before is it just felt so right. And I was so energized, so like excited about what I was doing at that time. And so I moved over, and for the first while it was Blaise, our lead, 10 engineers and me, and so I was kind of serving as this, I think we called it chief of staff, but I think I was just kind of doing whatever needed to be done, to be honest, which is always fun. I always think that's a fun role, like a very unstructured role. And then I was kind of spinning up user research and to some extent UX, but we started to hire designers and everything like that too. And then, it was all learning on the job. I always tell people too. So I never, I worked with a bunch of people who've been thinking and studying and building AI for decades. It's like, I never really even cared about AI before jumping over there. And I would say too is, got excited about a vision for it. And then we just started trying to make stuff. And this is earlier on. So this is like 2014, 2015. And so this is a lot more with the computer vision models. This is way before the LLMs and everything. And so we were just trying to build products with these models that had just escaped the research labs. Sorry, that's kind of weird language for it. They had just kind of been proven out in the research labs. And so we're like, oh, we think we can actually use these in products. And so we were trying to design with them. And from there, as you're trying to build products, you start to notice patterns like a user researcher does. And so I started to put together these resources. I've been thinking about this lately. I've been doing a little talk on 10 years trying to find the role of UX in AI. And the very first presentation I put together was called, I'd forgotten for a while and I remembered, it was called How to Build User Trust in Machine Learning. And the thing I thought was, I've been like reflecting on is we put trust in the very first resource. The very first presentation is just about trust. And to this day, it's the most important thing and the most kind of volatile thing in the space. It was a lot of getting excited about something, dedicating part of my time to it, my 20%, and moving over. And again, when I moved over, I just did what needed to be done. career ladder, who cares? Promotion, who cares? Whatever. I just want to be part of this. And then from there, more of the like visible success or whatever happened.
So it's clear that even in those early days working on AI at Google, like this idea of trust in AI started and was important. And when you were at Meta, your role was specifically working on responsible AI. Maybe for people who aren't familiar with that particular type of focus and role, can you talk a little bit about the importance of that role?
Yeah, I mean, the response, it was interesting because at Google, we talked about it much more when I led a group there with Fernanda Villegas and Martin Wattenberg, who are two fairly well known. They're now professors at Harvard, and they're well known in the research, human computer interaction, and data visualization space. And we started a group called People Plus AI Research, or PAIR. And we really talked about it through the lens of human-centered AI, coming from the tradition of human-centered design. And then there was kind of this adjacent movement, responsible AI, that was coming really, it was initially really from a lot of people with computer science backgrounds. And then it like really diversified the makeup like very quickly. And so these are two groups that kind of look at AI and, which is a very broad term and everything, but say, if we believe this is going to be one of the more consequential technologies, some people think of this era, some people think of all time, then we better be sure that we build it with a set of values and that it adheres to those values. And so this is where you hear things like fairness and safety and governance and trust and accountability. But it's, the way I think about it is the trickiest part about responsible AI is really saying what are the values that AI should embody and adhere to and constrain itself with, and then how do we do that? And so then, I actually at Google, I led the responsible AI UX team for a little bit before I left. And then I led the responsible UX team at Meta for a year.
Man, if you look over sort of the arc of your career, you have such a rich path and you've been able to accumulate so much knowledge over the course of that, especially during the time that you've worked in AI in a space that's so dynamic and volatile and constantly changing. How do you keep yourself sharp? What do you still do to kind of continue to invest in your own personal learning and growth?
Yeah, I think, it's funny. So I will get asked this sometimes. People are kind of like, what do you do? What do you listen to at this point? And my system is so strangely bespoke and, just an augmentation of my way of looking at things at this point that it's hard to explain to people. I take in probably too many newsletters, too many alerts, too many group chats sending each other papers. But there is like the mess of it makes sense somehow. I think also over the years, you build a filter where you go, oh, this matters versus, oh yeah, this is another paper or something. I think one of the things that I'm still surprised most people don't do is, I've always stayed very close to like archive and the research science papers. Like I read more computer science papers than I do psychology papers or HCI papers or anything like that. I think that's actually been a big differentiator I've found. And to me, it's kind of surprising because I don't know what else you would do. So to me, it just makes sense. But I think that differentiates a lot. I think another thing that I do is I just try to use all the products that are out there all the time. And I try to understand exactly like what the designer, the little d designer's intention is with it. What are they trying to do from a user experience point of view? Did they figure something out in a clever way that I haven't seen somebody else do? I've been trying to work on being less snarky for years, but if I see something that looks really clunky, not to dunk on it, but to say, okay, well, what did they have to believe to do this? Because it's, I might look at it and go, God, what? In my head, I might go, why would you do that? That's so stupid. But then, I try to catch myself and go, okay, well, but what would they have had to believe about this situation or their user or the model to do this? Oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I think the third thing I try to do a lot of is, all of my outside of work reading has, well, not none of it, but I try to stay away from AI to give myself a wider context of what does this mean? And I know I've been using the word arc a lot, but yeah, what is our trajectory here? Like what's happening? And that ranges, I read a lot of history and biographies. I find knowing how things came to be very fascinating. Sci-fi. I try like everyone, I feel like a lot of people like in my position, I try so hard to read more fiction. It's just a lot of it just doesn't pull me like the nonfiction. I wish I could do that, but trying to just understand. I would also say how things get made. Like right now, I'm usually like reading a book and then I have a book audiobook. The audiobook I'm just started is Masters of Doom. It's about Carmack and John Romero building Doom, and it's just so fascinating to hear the background, like how do you make things? Like how do you get obsessed and make things that people end up loving? And so I find that really interesting to try to understand better as a phenomenon.
You mentioned one of the things you do is sort of like dissect and unpack and I guess almost like mentally reverse engineer certain products. Do you have one that you've come across recently that you've either been fascinated with, or do you have one that you're sort of like trying to unpack right now?
Let me see. Let me go to the screen on my phone that I've been trying to unpack. One that I am very fascinated by. There's a few products that are essentially social networks for AIs, meaning they're kind of just AIs interacting with each other. The one I'm looking at on my phone here is Butterflies. And there's a few other ones, but I'm totally fascinated about what is this? And will people have any interest in it? And if they do, why? Because people have had parasocial relationships for forever. People love following celebrities. It's great. I don't have a relationship with that person, but oh, that's very cool. You did that. Oh, that's kind of interesting. And so I'm very fascinated if that becomes a thing. I first saw some of these apps. I thought it was art. I thought it was an art piece more than a product. But I find that, the things that I can't figure out what it is. What is the thesis here? What is the angle? I find that just super, super fascinating. Now I could probably answer it have I found something very useful versus something that's like an intellectual challenge too. But yeah, that was the one that pops out from my goodie screen here.
I've not seen those. Is this like, is the interest because the concept doesn't quite make sense and you're trying to figure out like what the motivation is, or these products that have traction and so you're trying to figure out what the like actual pull is because there's people who are like joining in?
Oh, gotcha. I think it's more the former. It's just this comes back to the curiosity thing. It's just surprise. It's not to sound jaded or whatever, but having been in the space for a while, I see a lot of stuff. And I'm like, yep, yeah, okay. You're at this point and you're thinking here, you'll be here in a couple months. It's, nothing really new. And so when something does surprise you, I don't know, it's like a music genre, right? And so you're kind of like, oh God, it's like another, indie band or whatever. And then somebody shocks you and you're like, whoa, wait, what is this? Or, you're like, I don't even know if I like it, but I'm going to listen to the album. And so I think there's a little bit more of that, of like just pure intellectual curiosity. Is there something that can expand my view a little bit? I also just like anything where I don't personally get it, but I can understand and sympathize with the person. Like we're seeing a lot more use cases where, there's like especially with the foundation models or the LLMs, is, people are using AIs in more like companionship use cases. And it's interesting because that term even, it really bifurcates people. Like it gets a reaction. But we've done the research and I've seen the videos of, I think a lot of times people write the people that have that kind of relationship as they write them off and they have to be weird somehow, or they got to, whatever, and put in your trope. They're in their basement, blah, 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 blah. But I've seen the research, and it's no, they're most people would probably call normal, and they wanted to talk out a particular topic, and they couldn't with any of their friends for very legitimate reasons, And so I think that there's those things I think are really interesting too. These kind of things that appear niche, but could have a trajectory to wider acceptance in the future.
That's interesting. I'm trying to remember where I saw it. It was just the other day. Someone was talking about being able to have a conversation that is completely void of any judgment, kind of like the freedom that gives. And we all try to be that person, that listener that is judgment free, but that's really hard to do with another person.
We have a social obligation. Yeah, there's a really wonderful, there's kind of two things that really stand out about these, talking to an AI or interacting with a model, whatever. Some people really don't like the anthropomorphic language. So I just think as a social psychologist, I just think we're going to fall into it eventually. One is they're always available. You don't have to worry about if somebody's up and you want to talk late night. And two is the lack of judgment. And so one of the ways I kind of equate it to is, if you or anybody in your audience has gone to therapy, it's kind of amazing, to be able to say these things to people where you're like, I can't say this to anyone in my life because I'm going to see them again. And they're going to know that, and they're going to attach that as part of their feelings about me. And I don't want that. I'm not okay with that. I'm doing my impression management. And so there is like that amazing weight that can kind of come off by going to therapy because of those conditions around the conversation. And there's a lot of that happens when you are, you're also sometimes there's an interaction like that, but also a lot of people do what's called rubber ducking. And if people aren't familiar with that, it's you have to, sometimes getting into a dialogue just helps you think better. And so the thing is, I believe the original was around coding and trying to figure out hard coding problems, but you put a rubber duck on your desk and you just talk to the rubber duck and you say, here's the problem I'm solving and I can't figure it out. And it's kind of funny. You're almost imagining them say why. That's the magic, is you're now in dialogue and you're now sorting things out. And I think that there's a real power there as well, to use the unique ability of dialogue to help people solve their own problems. And to me, that's super centered. That's very natural. That's very innate to who people are. That's not mechanical or tech dystopian to me. That's very us leaning in and using it for to help people solve their problems and become who they want to become.
I want to take this for a minute back to some of the listeners who are like earlier in their career. We've talked a lot about over the last few minutes what's going on with AI and where it's going, and it's such a fast moving. And you have people who are really interested in AI getting into the workforce and into the industry right now, and there's almost the like increased importance of this idea of maybe going to where the puck is going rather than where it is now. And you sort of have an inside track. And so for someone who's like really early in their career right now, who has an interest in AI, they want to be working in the same sort of on the same sort of problems that you're working on. What should they be focused on right now? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think that you want to balance a technical awareness and a not caring about AI. And I mean that in a way that where I see people make a lot of mistakes where people say, we just don't know anything about AI. It's a black box. And it's not true. Like actually explainability, interpretability techniques are advancing all the time. Yes, we don't know exactly how they work, blah, blah, blah. But people kind of get hung up on the tropes, or they go way farther than what is currently technically capable. And so they do this like grand vision and it's cool. We can't do any of that. And there's like huge, hard problems in the middle. And so one is, I think, is like a real kind of grounding in capabilities right now and then trying to understand kind of how quickly they're advancing. So that might be like if you're thinking around, text summarization or something like that, you should go and use a bunch of summarization products and, try to do some searching and understand where that is. So you are grounded in the capabilities. It's kind of like trying to design for mobile before, accelerometers were common. And you're like, creating all these ideas around that would require an accelerometer. It's like, okay, cool, but we don't have that. And then I think the other part is that we're going to hit, we're at an inflection point right now where if you look at a lot of the benchmarks and everything like that, like a new model comes out and the benchmark performance is usually mixed. Even now, it's, well, we beat so-and-so on four of these, but we didn't beat them on these other ones. And, the scaling laws will likely hold for a while and models will become better and better and better, but that's the capabilities part. I think though, what will happen is we are just going to we're at this point now where people are kind of saying, great, but what does it do for me? Like, where's the value? I mean, you never escape that, right? There's always novelty and you never escape that. And so I think it's really about assuming AI will be woven in somehow to then saying, okay, so how can it provide the most value to people? How can it do so in a responsible way that's transparent, that respects the use of data, that has safety guards on it? And then how does it kind of integrate into existing workflows? How does it become new experiences? But how do we not scream it's AI from the rooftops a ton and just make it a really delightful experience? And I think that's where we're moving into this, AI as a native design material. We're still just not there. We're still kind of like either centering it or it's way background, like spam filtering or something like that. And I think we're going to find that balance finally. And so I'd really encourage to think about that, not putting AI right in the middle of things, but think about it as a design material you now have, and how will you use that with the other materials that you have?
Such good advice. Jess, this has been amazing. There's so many topics that we covered, and I think so many that we just like skated right over that was difficult not to dig into and unpack. Maybe we'll have to come on to a follow-up of this conversation.
Yeah, I'm up for it if you are.
Where can people find you online and follow your work?
LinkedIn's a good one, as boring as it sounds, but that is a place for me. I do have a X account and a Threads account. I think my handle everywhere is Jesscon, which is my first and middle name, JESSSCON. I think that's what it is, both of them. But yeah, I've been starting to do a little bit more, but I don't post all that much. But maybe this is a good kick for me to start doing more.
Cool. Well, thanks again for coming on the podcast. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
See ya. And that's a wrap for today's conversation with Jess Holbrook. His journey from psychology to shaping the future of AI offers a unique perspective on how different disciplines can converge to create something truly impactful. Whether it was his early career challenges or his deep dive into responsible AI, there's a wealth of insights to take away from his story. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Pixelated Path so you're always in the loop for our next deep dive into the interesting world of UX careers. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Chris Abad, and I'll catch you next time on Pixelated Path.